Daniel Hayes woke to the soft buzz of his alarm at 6:30 a.m., just as he did every weekday. The early June sun filtered through the blinds of his suburban Chicago home, casting slatted shadows across the tidy bedroom. He blinked away sleep, rolled over, and smiled at the sight of his wife, Jessica, still slumbering beside him. In moments like this, with the world still quiet and his wife's warm presence close, Daniel felt at peace. At 36, Daniel had built the life he always thought he wanted. He had a steady job as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm downtown. The pay was good, allowing them a comfortable mortgage on their two-story house on a tree-lined street in Oak Park. Each morning he commuted by train into the city, a travel mug of coffee in hand and the Wall Street Journal folded under his arm. It was a routine he found oddly satisfying. Predictable, stable, safe. Jessica often teased him for his love of routine. She was a year younger at 35 and had a more spontaneous spirit. Where Daniel liked to plan things to the letter, Jessica thrived on little surprises, a last-minute road trip, an impulsive dinner reservation at a new restaurant, small indulgences that added sparks to their 8-year marriage. She worked in marketing at a local boutique agency, a job she enjoyed for its creativity and social environment. They would carpool on days she needed to go into the city for client meetings, chatting about news or weekend plans, the kind of comfortable conversation that comes with years spent together. That morning, as always, Daniel leaned over and brushed a light kiss on Jessica's shoulder to wake her. "Morning, Jess," he said softly. She stirred, turning her head toward him, blue eyes fluttering open. A slow smile spread across her face. "Morning," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. She stretched under the covers. "Is it that time already?" "Afraid so. I'll start the coffee," he replied. He swung his legs out of bed and shrugged on his robe. As he moved through their well-appointed bedroom, walls painted a serene pale green, a wedding photo on the dresser, laundry neatly in the hamper. He felt a familiar swell of contentment. This was their little world, and he loved it. Maybe it wasn't full of excitement every day, but it was theirs. Downstairs, Daniel went through his usual motions, grinding coffee beans for the French press, listening to the local news on the kitchen radio as he prepared a simple breakfast of toast and fruit. The aroma of coffee eventually coaxed Jessica down. She appeared wearing her plush maroon bathrobe, hair tousled and face bare of makeup, yet still as beautiful to him as the day they met. He poured her a cup without her needing to ask. She smiled gratefully and took a sip. You make the best coffee," she said, leaning on the counter. She scanned the headlines of the newspaper he'd brought in. "Anything interesting today?" "Just the usual," Daniel replied, standing across from her. "Markets up, some local politics drama. Cubs lost again." He gave a small chuckle. The banality of it was comforting. Jessica smirked and rolled her eyes at the mention of the perpetually struggling baseball team. They ate breakfast together, discussing an office anecdote from the day before and a new series they'd started streaming. It was an ordinary, pleasant morning like hundreds of others they had shared. If there was any undercurrent of tension or dissatisfaction, Daniel didn't notice it. As far as he was concerned, life was good. After breakfast, they parted ways to get ready for work. Suit and tie for him, a navy pencil skirt and blouse for her. In the driveway, they shared a quick kiss before each heading to their own car. Today, their schedules differed, with Jessica staying in the suburbs for a client site visit while Daniel headed into the city. He watched her drive off, her sedan disappearing around the corner, and felt a swell of affection and luck. He had a loving wife, a comfortable home, a solid career. What more could a man want? As he merged onto the highway toward the train station, Daniel had no inkling that this ordinary day would mark the beginning of the end of that quiet life he cherished. If anyone had asked, he would have said he was a happily married man. He had no idea that storm clouds were gathering just beyond his peaceful horizon. Chapter 2. Seeds of Doubt. 2 weeks later, on a balmy Friday evening, Daniel arrived home a bit earlier than usual. He had skipped the post-work happy hour with his colleagues, eager to start the weekend with Jessica. They had a tradition of ordering takeout and watching a movie on Fridays, a relaxing ritual to shake off the work week stress. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Jessica's car already there. She typically beat him home on days she worked locally, so nothing seemed amiss. "Hey, I'm home," Daniel called out as he walked through the front door of their house. The air inside was cool and carried a hint of the vanilla candle Jessica liked to burn. He shrugged off his jacket and loosened his tie. "Jess?" "In the kitchen," her voice rang out. He found her at the kitchen island, 2 wine glasses set out and a bottle of Pinot Noir breathing. She turned and greeted him with a bright smile, though her eyes looked a touch tired. Her chestnut brown hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she had changed out of her work clothes into yoga pants and an oversized university sweatshirt. "I thought we could open this tonight," Jessica said, nodding at the wine. "It's that bottle from our trip to Napa." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. "Sounds perfect. You read my mind." He moved to wrap an arm around her waist and kissed her. She kissed back, but he noticed she pulled away a little sooner than usual. He sensed a slight tension, but before he could dwell on it, she handed him the corkscrew and started chatting about her day. As he opened the wine, Jessica recounted a client meeting she'd had that afternoon. Daniel half listened, happy just to be home. Yet something was nibbling at the back of his mind. He realized she hadn't asked about his day at all, a small thing, but unlike her. Typically, she showed genuine interest in how his day went, who he met, the little dramas of office life. Tonight, her mind seemed elsewhere. They settled on the couch with their wine. Takeout containers from their favorite Thai place were spread on the coffee table, half-eaten pad see ew and red curry, as the opening credits of a thriller movie played on the TV. Jessica curled up next to him, feet tucked under her. Daniel tried to focus on the film, but he kept noticing that Jessica was unusually quiet. About 20 minutes into the movie, her phone buzzed on the end table. She glanced at the screen quickly and flipped the phone face down. Daniel caught a glimpse of her expression. She looked briefly anxious. Normally, she might check a text and even read it aloud if it was her sister or a friend. This time, she let it go. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Jessica gave a start, as if she had forgotten he was right next to her. "Huh? Oh yeah, it's nothing, just spam." She attempted an airy laugh and snuggled closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. But Daniel could feel the slight stiffness in her body. He returned his attention to the TV, not wanting to pry. Everyone deserves a bit of privacy, he reminded himself. One unexplained text was hardly cause for concern. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted. He found himself staring at the flickering screen, the plot of the movie completely lost on him, as he replayed Jessica's subtle reaction in his mind. That faintly troubled look in her eyes, was it guilt? Worry? That night, after the movie ended, Jessica went up to bed while Daniel tidied the kitchen. As he rinsed the wine glasses, he noticed her phone still lying face down on the end table. It crossed his mind to glance at it. The impulse surprised and unsettled him. He had never felt the need to snoop before. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. With a guilty shake of his head, Daniel dismissed the idea and turned off the lights. Whatever that message was, he would not betray her privacy over a moment of paranoia. By the time he joined her in bed, Jessica was already asleep or pretending to be. In the dim light from the hallway, he watched her back rise and fall in a slow rhythm. He wanted to believe everything was fine, that the uneasy feeling tugging at him was just the product of an overactive mind. He told himself as much as he drifted into a restless sleep, unaware that this was only the first of many small signs he would struggle to ignore. Chapter 3. An Unwanted Revelation. The following Saturday, a neighborhood summer festival took place in downtown Oak Park. It was the kind of event Daniel and Jessica usually loved. Food stalls, live music, arts and crafts vendors lining the closed-off streets. Earlier in the week, Daniel had suggested they go, but Jessica had begged off. "My old college roommate is coming into town that day," she had said. "We're doing a girls' day, spa, lunch, the works. Rain check on the festival." Daniel had been a little disappointed but didn't push. He figured he could catch the festival with her on Sunday if it ran all weekend, or meet up with his friend Steve instead. Steve was a colleague from work who lived nearby and often hung out with them as a couple. When Daniel texted him that morning, Steve replied that he'd be at the festival in the afternoon with some friends and told Daniel to come join. Around noon, Jessica left the house, dressed casually in jeans and a light green blouse, saying she'd be picking up her friend Monica from the train station. She gave Daniel a quick peck on the cheek. "Have fun at the festival if you go. Love you," she said brightly. Her tone was breezy, normal. Only a faint flicker in her eyes, was it nervousness, gave Daniel pause. But he quickly brushed it aside and wished her a great time. Daniel decided to swing by the festival later, thinking it better than moping around alone. But as he got caught up doing yard work, time slipped away. By the time he showered and headed downtown, it was nearly 4 p.m. and the festival was winding down. He met up with Steve outside a coffee shop where a few of Steve's friends were chatting. They handed Daniel a craft beer from one of the stalls and fell into easy conversation about work gossip and the festival highlights. "Jessica couldn't make it?" Steve asked, glancing around as if expecting to see her. "Nah," Daniel replied, taking a swig from the plastic cup. The beer was warm by now and slightly bitter. She had plans with Monica. Remember her college friend? Spa day. Steve raised his eyebrows. "Oh, right." There was an odd note in his voice that Daniel caught. "What?" Daniel asked, lowering the cup. Steve was a terrible liar and something was written on his face at that moment, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. Probably nothing. It's just..." Steve hesitated, then nodded toward his phone. "We took a bunch of pictures earlier. Here, check this one out." He unlocked his phone and pulled up a photo. It showed Steve and two of their friends grinning with the bustling festival street in the background. But Steve zoomed in past their faces to a spot over his friend's shoulder. In the background of the photo, slightly blurred but unmistakable, was Jessica. She stood in front of a jewelry vendor's booth, laughing at something. Next to her was a tall man with sandy blonde hair in his late 30s, casually draping an arm around her waist. The man leaned in, whispering something in her ear with a familiarity that made Daniel's stomach drop. Jessica was looking up at him with a radiant, unguarded smile, a look Daniel realized he had not seen in a long time. A rush of blood pounded in Daniel's ears. He could barely hear his own voice as he whispered, "That's Jess. But who is—" The edges of Daniel's vision blurred. He recognized the man, he thought. Not by face, but he remembered seeing a photo of Jessica and a guy from her college days. Adam, her ex-boyfriend from senior year. She had shown Daniel an old college album years ago. He had laughed about her 2000s fashion, and she'd pointed out a few past friends and one serious ex. Adam with the sandy blonde hair. Steve put a hand on Daniel's shoulder, steadying him. "I wasn't sure it was her at first," Steve said carefully. "I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but Dan, I'm sorry, man." Daniel tore his eyes from the phone and looked at Steve in disbelief, hoping for some alternate explanation. Perhaps this was a look-alike of Jess, or maybe it was her, but an innocent coincidence. Bumping into an old friend? But the way she leaned into Adam's side in the next photo Steve swiped to, another candid shot caught by chance, told a different story. In that one, Adam's hand was clearly intertwined with hers. He felt the world tilt. The noise of the festival, the laughter of people around, all receded as a hollow roar filled his ears. He realized his hands were shaking. "This can't be," he muttered, barely audible. His rational mind kicked in, grasping for denial. She said Monica was in town. Maybe that guy is just... Maybe Monica canceled and she ran into an old friend? Even as the words left his lips, they felt weak and delusional. Steve's expression was pained. "Dan, I think we both know what it looks like. I'm sorry. I really am." A torrent of emotions surged through Daniel. Shock, confusion, anger, heartbreak all at once. He wanted to throw the phone to erase those images from existence. His eyes burned. But in the midst of the storm inside him, he forced himself to remain outwardly composed. The festival crowd was still chattering and moving around them, oblivious to the implosion of Daniel's world happening in their midst. He took a long, unsteady breath. "Send me those pictures, Steve," he said quietly, his voice strained. Steve nodded and quickly complied, hitting send. "Do you want me to, I don't know, do anything? Talk to Jess or..." "No." Daniel's response was sharp enough that Steve flinched. He softened it with a grateful look. "No, but thank you. And thank you for telling me. I need to think." His friend hesitated, clearly worried. But he must have seen that Daniel wasn't ready to talk further. Steve pulled him into a quick, awkward hug. "I'm here if you need me," he offered. Daniel managed a nod, and then, clutching his phone with the newly received photos, he walked away from the fading festival, not even sure where he was headed. The evening sun was dipping low, casting long shadows on the pavement as he found himself turning onto a quieter side street. He stopped and leaned against a brick wall behind a closed bookstore, out of sight of the main street. With trembling fingers, he opened the photo gallery on his phone. There they were, two snapshots of his wife with another man, looking for all the world like a happy couple. In one, Jessica's face was lit up in a laugh he recognized as her genuine, uninhibited laugh. A laugh she hadn't shared with him in far too long, a realization that pierced his heart. In the other photo, they looked cozy, intimate. Nausea rolled through him. The evidence was undeniable. Jessica, his Jess, was cheating on him. And not just with anyone, but with her ex-boyfriend, a ghost from her past that Daniel never considered a threat until now. His mind flooded with disjointed thoughts. How long had this been going on? Why Adam? How could she do this? Was it something he had done or failed to do? He felt an urge to cry and scream at the same time, but no tears came. Just a cold numbness creeping over him. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, Daniel pushed off the wall. He needed to go home. He needed to see his wife, though he wasn't sure in that moment if he would scream at her or break down in sobs or do something far worse. For now, all he knew was that the quiet life he had cherished was shattered and nothing in the world made sense anymore. Chapter 4. Beneath the Surface. The house was quiet and dim when Daniel returned home. It was early evening, the golden summer light slanting through the living room windows. He half expected to find Jessica there already, but the place was empty. She wasn't back yet from her supposed day out with Monica. Daniel paced the living room, heart still hammering against his ribcage. His mind was a haze of betrayal and anguish, but he knew he needed to keep control. He didn't even know what he would say to her when she walked through the door. A dozen times he pictured it, confronting her with the photos, demanding an explanation, yelling, crying. Each imagined scenario left him feeling more miserable and uncertain. He wandered into the kitchen and mechanically poured himself a glass of water. His eyes fell on the small corkboard by the fridge where they stuck notes and reminders. A bright pink sticky note in Jessica's neat handwriting read, "Monica, arrive 11 a.m. SAT train." Another note below it, "Spa 1 p.m. res." It was all part of her cover story, meticulously crafted. Seeing the tangible proof of her lie made Daniel's stomach churn. She had gone so far as to write it out and stick it on their fridge, as if willing the lie to become reality. At around 6:30 p.m., headlights swept across the front window. Daniel's pulse quickened. He hurried to compose himself, easing into a casual stance by the kitchen counter, though every muscle in his body was taut. The front door opened and Jessica breezed in, car keys jangling in her hand. She looked a bit tired but content, a slight flush on her cheeks as if she'd spent the day in the sun. "Hey," she called out when she saw him, surprised. "You're home early for a Saturday. Did you end up going to the festival?" Daniel forced a smile that he hoped looked genuine. "Yeah, for a bit. Met up with Steve and the gang." His voice sounded normal, he thought. As normal as it could, while an inferno raged inside him. Jessica walked over and, to his surprise, gave him a quick, almost perfunctory hug. "That's great. I'm beat. Monica and I had a full day." She set her purse on the counter. "Spa was wonderful. Then we did some shopping on Michigan Avenue. We actually ran into one of her old coworkers at lunch. Such a small world," Jessica chattered on, offering an elaborately detailed account of her fictional day. Daniel felt a wave of nausea at how easily she lied to him, the man she had promised to love and honor. He nodded along, not trusting himself to say much. The more she talked, the more surreal it felt. How could she stand there, face open and friendly, spinning stories, after spending the day in another man's arms? Was this the first time she had deceived him like this? It felt practiced, polished. "How's Monica doing?" he managed to ask, testing her. "Oh, she's great," Jessica replied, without missing a beat. "Still the same old Monica, talking a mile a minute. She says hi, by the way. I told her we'd visit her in New York sometime." "Sure," Daniel said softly. His hands were clenched on the counter behind him where he leaned, the edge digging into his palms. He hated how hurt and weak his voice sounded in his own ears. Jessica tilted her head, finally really looking at him. "You okay? You look a little pale." She stepped closer, placing a cool hand on his forehead as if checking for a fever. The gesture was tender, intimate. The kind of thing a loving wife would do. It took everything into Daniel not to recoil. "I'm okay," he lied. "Maybe just a headache coming on." That at least wasn't far from the truth. His head did throb, pounded by the tempest of emotions he was holding back. "Oh no. Do you want some aspirin?" She already moved toward the cabinet where they kept medicine. "I'll get it," he quickly interjected. "You must be exhausted from your day. Why don't you sit? I'll order us something for dinner." Jessica smiled appreciatively. "That would be lovely. I'm starving. How about that new Italian place?" He agreed and busied himself with placing a takeout order on his phone. Anything to avoid meeting her eyes for too long. In truth, food was the last thing on his mind, but keeping the facade mattered now. He felt like he was performing in a play, each line and action deliberate. While they waited for dinner to arrive, Jessica chatted a bit more about supposed happenings in Monica's life. The new job Monica got, wedding plans for another mutual friend. Daniel responded minimally, afraid that if he engaged too much, he would let slip the fury and hurt roiling inside. He could tell she noticed his quietness, but she seemed to attribute it to his headache. They ate on the couch with a TV show humming in the background. Daniel barely tasted the lasagna he forked into his mouth. Across from him, Jessica ate heartily, sighing with satisfaction at the rich flavors. There was a comfortable domesticity in the scene that, under other circumstances, would have made Daniel happy. Now it felt like a mockery of his life. At one point, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel's eyes flicked toward it instinctively. He saw the name Adam flash on the screen before Jessica quickly silenced the phone and flipped it over, much as she had the night before. His chest constricted. She hadn't even bothered to disguise the name. Perhaps she thought he wouldn't notice or wouldn't remember the significance of Adam. Or maybe Adam was such a common name that it wouldn't raise suspicion. It took all his self-control to keep his face neutral. Jessica gave an irritated little sigh. It's my boss," she lied smoothly, catching his glance. "Probably another weekend email about the Peterson account. I'll deal with it later." Daniel just nodded. The lies were piling up one after another, wrapping him in a cocoon of deceit that left him both furious and heartsick. After dinner, he cleaned up the containers. His mind was racing. The sight of her phone lighting up with Adam's name had nearly broken his composure. He needed space, needed to get away from her before he said or did something he couldn't control. "I think I'm going to turn in early," he announced quietly. "The headache, you know." Jessica looked concerned. "Of course, I'll clean up here. You go rest. I hope you feel better." He murmured thanks and headed upstairs ahead of her. In the master bedroom, he closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. The room smelled of her perfume, a floral scent he once loved and found comforting. Now it just made him feel cold. Daniel knew he wouldn't be able to share a bed with her that night, not without betraying the turmoil he felt. So he pulled the spare blankets from the closet and made up a rough bed on the couch in his home office down the hall. When Jessica eventually came upstairs, he intercepted her in the hallway. "I think I'll sleep in the office tonight," he said, pressing a hand to his temple in feigned pain. "Just so I don't keep you up tossing and turning." Her brow creased with worry. She lifted onto her toes and kissed his cheek softly. "All right. Hope you feel better, hun. Love you." "Love you too," he forced out. The words burned with their falseness as he turned away. In the silent darkness of his small office, Daniel lay on the lumpy couch staring at the ceiling. Every time he blinked, he saw flashes of those photos in his mind. Jessica's joyful face with Adam by her side. He saw her phone lighting up with the man's name. He heard her voice, so sweet and earnest, weaving lies without a quaver. The woman lying just down the hall had become a stranger to him. He felt a tear finally escape and roll down the side of his face. It was followed by another, and then a quiet sob racked his chest. Daniel pressed a pillow over his face, choking out the grief and rage into the fabric so she wouldn't hear him. In that private darkness, he allowed himself that moment of despair. But even as the tears flowed, anger began to harden within him, like molten metal cooling into a sharp blade. Betrayal this deep couldn't be undone with apologies or even a simple separation. A part of him, the part still in shock, wanted to storm into the bedroom, confront her with everything, demand to know why. Yet a colder, growing part of him whispered, "Not yet. Don't just end it. Make her pay for this." As the hours crept past and exhaustion finally pulled him into a fitful sleep, Daniel realized that his life as he knew it was over, and in its place, something new was taking shape within him, a resolve forged from pain. Jessica had broken his heart, but he would make sure that in doing so, she hadn't broken him. Somehow, some way, he would survive this. And more than that, he would ensure she faced the consequences of the choice she had made. Chapter 5. Gathering the Pieces. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of Daniel's home office, where he had eventually fallen asleep on the couch. He woke Sunday morning with a stiff neck and a heart that sank as reality came rushing back. For an instant, in the fog of waking, he had almost forgotten the nightmare of the previous day. But the weight in his chest quickly reminded him. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Through the doorway, he could hear a faint movement downstairs, cupboard doors opening and closing. Jessica was awake, likely making breakfast. Sunday pancakes, their little tradition. The thought turned his stomach. How was she carrying on as if nothing was wrong? As if she hadn't driven a stake through their life just 24 hours ago? Daniel knew he needed more information before he decided his next move. The photos alone were damning, but a part of him required clarity. How long had this been going on, and how deeply entwined was she with Adam? He needed the full scope of her betrayal, both for any legal confrontation to come and, in a way, for his own closure. If he was going to act methodically, he needed evidence and knowledge. His opportunity came sooner than he expected. As he shuffled into the kitchen, he found Jessica at the stove flipping pancakes, the smell of butter and maple syrup filling the air. She wore a light sundress and her hair was loosely knotted. She looked up with a warm smile that made Daniel's chest ache. "Morning, hun. Neck feeling any better?" she asked, noting his slight wince as he rolled his shoulders. "A bit," he mumbled. In truth, the physical soreness was the least of his pains. "Need coffee." She gestured with the spatula to the fresh pot she'd brewed. "Already made. Pancakes will be up in a minute." He poured himself a mug and leaned on the counter, watching her in silence for a moment. It was almost possible to pretend nothing had changed. Almost. But then he caught sight of her phone on the dining table, next to the folded Sunday newspaper. The device that contained the secrets of her double life. Jessica followed his gaze. "Oh, can you hand me my phone? I want to check if Monica sent any pictures from yesterday. She took a few of us at the spa." Her voice was casual, but Daniel noted the slightest uptick in pitch. His jaw tightened. More lies. He walked over and picked up her phone. It was an older iPhone model, and as he pressed the home button, the screen lit up, prompting for the passcode. Instinctively, he tried the 4-digit code he'd seen her use before. It was the year of her birth, 1989. The phone unlocked. For a split second, Daniel was tempted to confront her right then and there. The audacity of asking him to hand over the phone that she no doubt used to coordinate with Adam made his blood boil. But instead, he forced himself to stay composed and took a slow breath. He carried the phone to the stove and handed it back, careful not to betray anything. "Here you go." "Thanks." She took it and swiped a few times in what looked like an attempt to look up those non-existent spa photos. Daniel turned away under the guise of retrieving plates, giving her some privacy. He needed her to believe he wasn't suspicious, that he was just his normal self. They sat down to eat, Daniel barely managing a few bites of pancake. He felt Jessica's eyes on him intermittently, concern in her gaze. "You sure you're okay? You seem out of it," she asked. "Didn't sleep well," he said. "Maybe I'm coming down with something." She reached over and gave his hand a squeeze. "Take it easy today. Maybe you should skip mowing the lawn or any chores. Just relax." Her solicitousness would have been endearing on any other day. Now it felt like poison-laced honey. "Yeah," he murmured, pulling his hand away gently to sip his coffee. He couldn't play the normal husband for long. He needed a break from her presence to clear his head and plan. After breakfast, Jessica announced she was going to run some errands. Grocery shopping for the week, a stop at Target for household items. She asked if he wanted to join, but he shook his head, citing the fake illness. With a peck on his cheek, she grabbed her phone and purse and headed out. The moment he heard her car back out of the driveway, Daniel sprang into action. He knew he had perhaps an hour, maybe 2 at most, before she returned. First, he hurried upstairs to their bedroom. Jessica had a vanity table with drawers. In one of them, she sometimes tucked away personal things, perhaps a journal or old letters. He rummaged carefully. No journal, but he did find a small stack of greeting cards tied with a ribbon. Curious, he glanced at them. They were old love notes and birthday cards, some from him over the years, one from her late grandmother, and one that caught his eye immediately, a card with a sailboat on the front. It was dated about 6 months ago, signed Yours a love card from Adam. Inside, a short handwritten message mentioned second chances and always yours. Daniel's jaw clenched as he read it. 6 months. At least that long, he realized. Quite possibly, that card marked when the affair rekindled. He snapped a photo of the card with his own phone and carefully replaced everything as it was. Next, he turned to her nightstand. Most of it was clutter, paperbacks, lotion, a half-finished water bottle, but in the back of the drawer, he discovered a thin burner phone he'd never seen before. His heart thudded. She had a second phone. He fished it out, hand trembling slightly. It was powered off. He pressed the power button, and it blinked to life. It was a cheap prepaid phone, the kind someone might use to avoid leaving a record. It didn't even require a passcode to access. As soon as the screen lit, it began beeping with notifications. Apparently, she'd turned it off last night and missed several texts. Daniel's eyes scanned the messages flooding in. Adam. Good morning, beautiful. I miss you already. Adam. Did you get home safe? Adam. You must still be asleep, dreaming of you. Daniel felt a visceral pang reading the words another man had written to his wife. He forced himself to scroll further. The message history was all there. Dozens upon dozens of texts between Jessica and Adam over the past months. Some were mundane check-ins. Others were filled with affection and flirtation that made Daniel sick to his stomach. They referenced meetups at hotels, lunch hours spent together, even a weekend trip when Jessica had claimed to visit her sister in Milwaukee. The depth of her deceit was staggering. He took photos of the most incriminating and illuminating messages with his own phone. Each capture was another nail in the coffin of their marriage, and, he hoped, ammunition for her downfall. In one exchange from a few weeks ago, he saw Adam pressing her. Adam. When are you going to tell him? I hate sneaking around. Jessica. I know. I will. I'm scared, Adam. Adam. Scared of what? If you want out, just say it. We could be together. Jessica. I'm scared of hurting him. And of what happens after. I've been with Dan for so long. My whole life is with him. Leaving means losing a lot. Adam. You won't lose me. Jessica. I know. But I might lose security. Comfort. It sounds selfish, but I'm used to a certain life, and what if we don't work out either? Then I'd have nothing. Adam. You'll have me. I make enough for both of us. Jessica. Your condo barely fits you as is, and your startup isn't exactly stable yet. I'm not saying money is everything. I'm anxious. Adam. I think you just don't want to leave your safety net. Do you even want to be with me, Jess? Jessica. I do. God, I do. I love you. I'm just trying to be practical. I promise, after the holidays, I'll figure out a way. Daniel's hands were trembling by the time he finished reading that exchange. He felt simultaneously furious and shattered. She was in love with Adam. She admitted it plainly. And worse, she was hesitating to leave not out of any love for Daniel, but because she feared losing her comfortable lifestyle and the security he provided. The depth of her cowardice and selfishness took his breath away. He swallowed the bile in his throat and continued searching. Another message from just a few days ago mentioned something about a plan. Jessica. I looked at apartments online. If I move out, I'd need some of our savings for first and last month's rent, plus furniture. Adam. Take whatever you need. It's not like he'll know if you're careful. Jessica. I can't just empty our joint account, he'd notice. Maybe I can slowly skim from it. Or I was thinking, if I ask him to sell the house, our house next year, we'd split the equity. That could give me enough to start fresh. Adam. You really want to wait that long? Jessica. I don't know. I'm just trying to be smart about it. I don't want to end up with nothing. That was enough. More than enough. Daniel had seen every thought and fear of hers laid bare. She had been strategizing how to leave him, how to make sure she siphoned off money for herself in the process, all while continuing to smile at him across the dinner table each night. The betrayal was total. Daniel carefully powered off the burner phone and placed it back exactly where he found it. He took a moment to straighten up. wiping any sweat from his palms on his jeans. Evidence in hand, photos of texts, the secret phone itself, the card from Adam. He felt a grim sense of resolve solidifying. The naive, trusting husband in him was gone. In his place was someone colder, someone calculating. If Jessica was afraid of ending up with nothing, he would make sure that fear came true in spades. Before leaving the bedroom, Daniel opened the closet safe where they kept important documents. His fingers flipped through file folders until he found the one labeled Prenuptial Agreement. He had almost forgotten about the prenup. At the time of their marriage, on advice from his father, and with a bit of his own foresight, he and Jessica had signed a modest agreement about assets, mostly to protect a small inheritance he'd received from an uncle. But it also included clauses about infidelity both ways. At the time, they'd added it with a laugh, never imagining it would be invoked. Now, it could prove to be one of his strongest weapons. He skimmed the document and found the relevant section, a clause stating that if either spouse was unfaithful, the wronged party would be entitled to a greater share of the marital assets and could bar the adulterous spouse from seeking alimony. It wasn't an outright financial ruin clause, but it heavily favored him if he could prove her adultery. Relief and vindication washed over him. Jessica either had forgotten about this detail or never expected it to matter. He gently closed the safe, heart pounding with a strange mix of anguish and grim satisfaction. She had given him the tools to destroy her own careless phone, her written words, and a contract she'd signed long ago. When he heard the sound of her car pulling back into the driveway, Daniel descended the stairs, wearing a neutral expression. She came in juggling grocery bags. He moved to help her, taking 2 bags from her arms. "Thanks," she said, a little surprised by his sudden helpfulness. Usually they divided the chore more evenly. She began putting away vegetables and fruits. "Feeling any better?" "Some," Daniel replied. In truth, he felt like a man possessed by a cold, clear purpose. "Thanks for letting me rest." She smiled and leaned in, giving him a peck on the cheek. "Of course, you do so much. I might take a nap. I'm pretty wiped out from yesterday." He nodded, avoiding her eyes as he set a carton of milk in the fridge. "Go ahead. I'll finish up here." As Jessica headed upstairs for her nap, Daniel watched her go with a stony expression, the facade dropping now that her back was turned. He had what he needed to begin his campaign. There would be no more sleepless nights of confusion. Now he had direction. He would consult a lawyer this week, secure their finances under his control, and slowly tighten the trap he was setting for his wife. She had made her plans to leave him after carefully padding her landing. He would make sure that when she fell, she'd find nothing but hard ground. Chapter 6, Setting the Trap. Monday morning arrived with heavy clouds hanging low in the sky. The atmosphere matched Daniel's mood perfectly, gray and coldly determined. He dressed for work in the usual suit and tie, but in the mirror he barely recognized himself. There was a hard set to his jaw and an uncanny calm in his eyes. Today was the day he would begin putting his plan into action. At breakfast, he and Jessica fell into their normal routine. She chatted about her upcoming week, apparently a big client pitch meeting on Wednesday that she was nervous about. Daniel made sympathetic noises at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere, already plotting the logistics of his day. He had quietly scheduled a dental appointment on his work calendar for late morning, which in reality would be a consultation with a divorce attorney recommended discreetly by one of his former college classmates. "You sure you're feeling okay?" Jessica asked as they headed out the door. "You look a little tired still." Daniel gave her a small smile. "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep great. Monday, you know." She hugged him before they got into their separate cars. "Try not to work too hard. Love you." He swallowed the bitterness that rose in his throat and replied, "Love you too," shutting the car door quickly. On the train ride into the city, Daniel's mind was a flurry of planning. He reviewed the bullet points he'd jotted in a note on his phone, careful to keep it on a private app she wouldn't see. Ensure evidence is secure, consult lawyer about prenup enforcement, protect bank accounts, prepare living arrangements, post-divorce, and, importantly, orchestrate the confrontation on his terms. The last item he underlined mentally. He wanted the moment of revelation to maximize the impact on Jessica's life. It wasn't enough to quietly serve her papers. He wanted her duplicity exposed, her support systems cut off, her sense of security demolished. At 11 a.m., Daniel found himself sitting in a plush yet sterile conference room of a downtown law office. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Marcia Klein, greeted him with a firm handshake. She had a reputation for being a shrewd divorce lawyer. Daniel felt a pang of reluctance as he realized he was truly about to discuss the end of his marriage with a stranger. But he steeled himself and laid out the situation succinctly. His wife's affair, the evidence he had gathered. He showed Marcia a few printed photos and excerpts of messages, and the prenup clause regarding infidelity. Marcia studied the materials calmly. "First off, I'm sorry you're going through this," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "From a legal standpoint, here's where you stand. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, which means that the court doesn't consider misconduct like adultery when dividing assets or granting spousal support. Unless there's a binding agreement like this prenup." She tapped the copy of the prenuptial agreement Daniel had provided. "This clause will likely hold. Illinois courts generally uphold prenups unless they're egregiously unfair or signed under duress. Infidelity clauses can be enforceable, and this one essentially waives or severely limits any alimony for the cheating spouse and influences asset split." Daniel nodded, recalling how routine it all seemed when they signed it. "So, if I file for divorce and invoke this clause, what happens?" "You'll want to file on the grounds of irreconcilable differences since that's the standard, but cite the infidelity and the prenup terms in the filing. We would present the evidence of her affair privately to her side as part of a settlement negotiation. Given what you've shown me, she'd be in a very weak position to contest. The prenup means she likely cannot claim any of your non-marital assets and would only be entitled to a limited share of marital assets. She also wouldn't get maintenance payments from you." "Good," he said quietly, gripping the armrests of his chair. That took care of financial ruin, or at least ensured she couldn't leech off him after this was done. Marcia gave a thin smile. "I understand you're angry, but remember, any evidence you gather must be obtained legally if we intend to use it in court. Hacking her email or something could backfire. The photos and messages you have, did you get those from her willingly?" She raised an eyebrow. Daniel schooled his features. "A friend happened to take the photo in public, and I found some messages on a phone she left lying around." It was technically true. She had left the burner phone in a drawer, and it was not password protected. Marcia didn't need all the details. "Understood. Those should be admissible enough if needed, though honestly, if she has competent counsel, they'll likely advise her to avoid a court battle and settle, given that evidence and the prenup." Marcia paused, then asked, "What outcome are you looking for beyond the straightforward legal divorce? I detect you have something specific in mind." Daniel realized his hands were clenched. He unclenched them. "I want to ensure she walks away with as little as possible, and I'm considering exposing her affair publicly. Is there any legal risk to me if I do that? Like telling our friends or her family?" The lawyer pursed her lips. "There's no law against sharing the truth of why you're divorcing, especially with family or friends. Slander or libel isn't an issue if it's true and you have evidence. However, be mindful that a very public shaming could complicate negotiations if she becomes less cooperative out of anger. But ultimately, that's your personal decision. My job is to protect your interests legally and financially." He appreciated her pragmatic approach. "Understood. What about our joint accounts and property in the meantime? I don't want her secretly moving money or suddenly running up credit cards if she suspects something." Until a divorce is filed and financial restraining orders are in place, it's wise to quietly safeguard assets. You could, for instance, withdraw half of any significant joint savings and put it in an account under your name alone. That way, you're taking what's likely to be your share anyway. Don't drain it entirely without telling her, as that could reflect poorly unless you can justify it. But securing a portion is often done. Also, monitor those accounts for any unusual activity on her end," Marcia continued. "For credit cards, you might want to freeze or close joint cards so she can't suddenly rack up debt that you'd be partially liable for. Maybe do that immediately before you confront her or file. Not too early that she notices. If you think she might react badly or try spiteful spending, it can be preemptively handled." Daniel made notes. The discussion went on for a while as they covered other aspects: the timeline of filing, the likelihood of mediation versus court, and how to handle serving her the papers. He left the attorney's office with a folder of documents and an unsettling sense of empowerment. This was really happening. He was engineering the endgame of their marriage. Back at work in the early afternoon, he could barely focus on spreadsheets and client portfolios. Instead, he discreetly logged into their joint bank accounts. Sure enough, he noticed something he hadn't before. Over the last month, there were 3 transfers of $200 each from their joint savings to Jessica's personal checking account. She had indeed begun skimming, just as she mentioned to Adam in the texts. The brazenness of it made him shake his head. She probably thought amounts that small would fly under his radar. With a steady hand, Daniel initiated a transfer of a much larger sum from the joint savings into a separate account he held in his name only. He left a cushion in the joint account to avoid immediate suspicion. If she checked it regularly, she might just think they moved funds to an investment or paid a big bill. Next, he called the bank and requested a freeze on opening any new lines of credit on their joint accounts, citing concerns about identity theft. It was a subtle way to prevent her from secretly taking out a loan or credit card. Over the next couple of days, Daniel moved like a man on a mission. He canceled a credit card they rarely used, claiming it was lost, so a new one would be issued only in his name. He also began quietly packing a few personal items from the house that he'd need if things exploded suddenly. A go-bag of sorts with some clothes, essential documents, and valuables to store at his office or in his car. If there was an ugly confrontation, he wanted to be prepared to leave on a dime or to ask her to leave, depending on the scenario. During this period, he continued to act as normally as he could around Jessica, though he spoke a little less to avoid betraying his feelings. She seemed a bit perplexed by his lingering, subdued mood, but he attributed it to stress at work. On Tuesday night, when he noticed her texting more frequently, no doubt with Adam, likely coordinating their next tryst, he casually mentioned, "You've been busy on your phone tonight. Anything interesting?" He couldn't resist a small probe. Jessica looked up, a flicker of alarm in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "Oh, just catching up with my sister. She's having some boy drama," she lied smoothly. Daniel merely nodded and gave a half smile as if accepting it. Inside, he felt another bolt of anger at how natural lying had become for her. By Wednesday, Daniel learned from a spyware app he'd secretly installed on Jessica's burner phone using the info he had gleaned on Sunday, that she and Adam planned to meet that evening after her big client pitch. Jessica had told him she'd probably have to work late for the presentation and might grab dinner with colleagues after to celebrate. Instead, the messages showed she planned to go to Adam's condo downtown when she was done with the client. Reading that plan had given Daniel an idea. The confrontation he'd been contemplating, perhaps this was the moment to catch them in the act. The thought of seeing them together in person made his blood boil, but it would also be the most visceral evidence and an image Jessica could never talk her way out of. And with the evidence he already had safely copied, he could theatrically catch them and then immediately drop the hammer of everything else. He decided to set the trap. At work that day, he mentioned to his boss that he might need to leave a bit early for a personal matter. He spent the afternoon riding waves of adrenaline and anxious anticipation, double-checking that all the pieces were in place for what he was about to do. The divorce papers were drafted and ready for filing. His lawyer was on standby. His finances were protected. Key friends and family, like his own parents and 2 close friends, were vaguely aware that something was wrong in his marriage as he had confided in them that he suspected Jessica of an affair, though he hadn't yet shown them proof. They were all quietly supportive and waiting for his cue. As the workday ended, the sky outside turned an ominous dark, thunder rumbling in the distance. Fitting, Daniel thought grimly. A storm was coming, and by the end of the night, if everything went as planned, Jessica's world would be torn apart by it. Chapter 7. Caught in the Act. Night had fallen by the time Jessica arrived at Adam's condo. The rain had started, a steady drizzle slicking the city streets. Daniel lurked in the shadows across the road, the hood of his jacket pulled low to obscure his face. He watched as a taxi pulled up and Jessica stepped out, clutching an umbrella. She looked around briefly. If she had any pang of guilt or fear of being seen, it didn't show at this distance. She hurried up the steps to the brownstone where Adam lived. A moment later, the front door buzzed and she slipped inside. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest. This was it. He waited a few minutes, letting her get comfortable, then crossed the street. A tenant was exiting just as he approached, and Daniel caught the door before it closed. Inside, the lobby was dim and empty. He knew Adam's unit number from Jessica's messages. 3B. He climbed the narrow staircase, every step heightening his adrenaline. Outside Unit 3B, he paused. Muffled voices came from within. Jessica's laugh, a sound that used to warm his heart, now cut him like glass. Anger flared hot inside him. He didn't bother trying to listen further. Instead, he raised his hand and pounded on the door. The voices went silent. For a moment, Daniel wondered if they would even answer. Then he heard cautious footsteps and the door opened a few inches. Security chain still latched. Through the gap, Adam's face appeared, handsome in a rough way, with the same sandy hair and confident air Daniel had seen in photos. Adam's brow creased. Can I help you?" he asked, clearly not recognizing Daniel. Daniel pushed the door hard, the chain straining. "Open the door!" His voice was deadly calm, each word dripping with barely restrained rage. Jessica's voice came from behind Adam, alarmed. "Who is it?" Adam glanced over his shoulder at her, then back through the gap. "I don't know," he began, but Daniel cut him off. "You know damn well who I am." Daniel's eyes burned into Adam's. Realization slowly dawned on the other man. His eyes widened. "Dan," came Jessica's voice, closer now. In the slice of the doorway, Daniel saw her appear behind Adam, her face a mask of shock. She was out of her office attire, wearing a casual dress and barefoot, as if relaxed for a cozy evening in. Seeing her like that in another man's home made Daniel's blood boil. "Open the door, Jessica," Daniel ordered. He heard the tremor in his own voice, a mix of fury and pain. "Or so help me, I'll break it." Adam bristled at that. "Hey man, you need to leave," he said, trying for a firm tone, though Daniel could see uncertainty in his eyes. "This isn't the time or place." Daniel didn't let him finish. With a surge of rage-fueled strength, he slammed his shoulder against the door. The chain burst off the frame with a loud crack, sending Adam stumbling backward. Jessica yelped in fright as the door flew open, banging against the wall. For a heartbeat, all three stood frozen in the small living room of the apartment, rain pattering on the windows. Jessica's face had gone pale, her eyes huge and brimming with panic. Adam recovered first, stepping between Daniel and Jessica, hands raised defensively. "You need to leave, now," he repeated, steel creeping into his tone. "Don't make me call the police." The audacity of that threat almost made Daniel laugh. He would call the police? The cheating lover playing the victim? Daniel's lips curled in a snarl. "Go ahead," he hissed. "Call them. And while you're at it, explain to them why a husband can't trespass in a confrontation with his wife's paramour." Jessica stepped forward, voice trembling. "Daniel, please, let's just calm down and talk." She was holding her hands out as if approaching a dangerous animal. I'm sorry, I never wanted..." Hearing her attempt to apologize, to explain in front of Adam was the final straw. All the emotions Daniel had held in check for days erupted. "You're sorry?" he shouted, the words echoing off the walls. "Now you're sorry, Jessica? Was it sorry when you were lying to my face every single day? When you were in his arms, in his bed, laughing like I haven't seen you laugh in years?" His voice cracked with the intensity of his anguish. Jessica burst into tears, covering her mouth. "I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. "It just happened. We didn't plan for this." "Didn't plan?" Daniel gave a harsh bark of laughter. "Like hell you didn't, sneaking around for months. A secret phone, using Monica as a cover, skimming money from our accounts. Don't you dare stand there and say you didn't plan it." Her eyes widened in true fear now. She hadn't realized how much he knew. Adam turned to look at her, confused. "What is he talking about?" Adam asked, glancing between Jessica and Daniel. Daniel took the opportunity of Adam's momentary distraction. He stepped forward and, with a furious shove, knocked Adam aside. Caught off guard, Adam stumbled against the arm of the couch. Before he could right himself, Daniel loomed over him, fist clenched. "You!" Daniel snarled at the man on the floor. "Stay out of this! This is between husband and wife." Adam's face twisted with anger and a touch of fear. "Don't touch her. You should leave," he insisted. But he didn't make a move to get up and physically confront Daniel again. Perhaps the look in Daniel's eyes was warning enough. Daniel turned his back on Adam, focusing on Jessica, who stood trembling near the kitchen island. "How could you?" he said, voice low now, shaking with emotion. "After everything I've done for you, everything we built, our home, our life. I gave you my heart, Jessica. And you threw it away for what? Some thrill? Some unresolved college fling? His words dripped contempt as he gestured toward Adam. She took a shaky step forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was weak, she stammered. It's not Dan's fault, Adam. It's mine, she added quickly, looking at Adam as if to protect him. The casual use of that man's first name, Adam, coming from her lips like that was salt in Daniel's wound. Don't you dare speak to him in front of me, Daniel snapped. You think I care whose fault it is? It's both of yours. And you, he pointed at Adam, eyes blazing. I hope whatever you got out of this was worth the hell you've just brought on her. Adam scowled, pushing himself up to his feet. Look, Dan, I know you're upset, he started. Upset? Daniel echoed incredulously. A dark, bitter calm settled over him then. He had said what he needed to say from his heart. Now it was time to execute what his head had planned. No, upset was when I found out. Upset was watching my wife lie to my face for weeks pretending everything was fine. I'm far beyond upset. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. His divorce papers prepared and printed. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed them onto the coffee table. They landed in front of Jessica. There. Irreconcilable differences. I'll be filing that first thing tomorrow morning. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel, please, can't we talk about this, please? Let me explain, she begged, voice cracking. I was going to tell you, I was scared. Scared of losing your comfortable life, Daniel spat, recalling her own words from the texts. Well, you were going to wait until after the holidays? Maybe convince me to sell the house so you could take half? I know everything, Jess. He advanced on her and she backed up against the island, trembling. The lies about Monica, the weekend in Milwaukee, the money you were squirreling away. Did you really think I was that clueless? That I'd just continue to be your meal ticket while you screwed him behind my back? His voice rose again, and she flinched. Adam moved as if to come to Jessica's defense, but Daniel cut him a glare. Unless you want a broken nose, stay back, Daniel warned, chest heaving. Adam halted. Jessica was sobbing openly now. I'm sorry, she wailed. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I was weak and stupid. It wasn't about using you, I swear. I felt lonely, or bored or something. And when I ran into Adam last year, old feelings came back and I made a terrible mistake. A mistake is one night, Daniel said coldly. This was calculated betrayal. He grabbed one of the papers from the table and slapped it with the back of his hand. You see these? Thanks to that prenup you signed, you're walking away with next to nothing. No alimony, minimal share of assets. You worried about having nothing? Congrats, you're getting exactly that. Jessica's face went sheet white. She looked at the papers, then at Daniel in horror. In her eyes, he saw it all. The realization of consequences, the dread of what was coming. Please, she whispered, don't do this. We can work something out, maybe counseling. I'll do anything, give you anything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... Her voice broke as Daniel shook his head slowly. Forgiveness? There will be none. You killed any love I had for you the moment you decided to crawl back to him. He felt strangely calm as he said it. Our marriage is over, and your life as you know it is over too. He stepped back and looked at both of them. Jessica crumpling into a sobbing mess against the counter and Adam hovering uncertainly nearby, jaw clenched. Daniel's gaze bore into Adam. Take a good look, Adam, he said with icy disdain. This is the woman you love. A liar and a cheat who just destroyed her husband because she was bored. You really think you two are headed for some fairy tale? More likely you'll destroy each other or you'll get bored too. And Jess? He turned to her one final time, softening just a fraction, not out of mercy, but out of finality. I want you out of our house by tomorrow. Tonight, even. I don't care where you go. Stay here with him if you want. But you are not welcome in my home anymore. Jessica slid to the floor, hugging her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She didn't respond, just shook with grief and fear. Adam moved toward her, kneeling and putting a hesitant arm around her shoulders. He glared up at Daniel. You've done what you came to do. You should leave. His tone was hostile but low, as if even he lacked conviction now. Daniel took a long look at the pathetic scene. The two lovers huddled on the floor amid the scattered divorce papers and broken pieces of their fantasy. He felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The truth was out, and the ruin had begun. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the apartment, the door left hanging ajar behind him. As he strode down the hallway, the sobs of his wife, no, his former wife-to-be, echoed in his ears, mingling with the rumble of thunder from outside. It was a sound he would carry with him for a long time, but it was exactly what he intended. The sound of her world collapsing. Chapter 8. Fallout begins. Rain was pouring by the time Daniel walked out onto the street. Lightning flashed in the distance as he stood on the curb, chest heaving from the confrontation. He felt drenched, whether from the rain or sweat or both. For a long moment, he simply inhaled the cool, wet air, trying to steady the adrenaline surging through him. It was done. The truth was out. He had watched Jessica break and Adam cower. In the chaos of his emotions, one feeling emerged clear and strong, grim satisfaction. But beneath that, another feeling simmered. Profound sadness, 8 years of marriage reduced to that ugly scene. He closed his eyes, letting the rain wash over his face. There would be time to mourn later, he told himself. Tonight was for action. Daniel stepped under a nearby awning and pulled out his phone. Despite the late hour, he dialed his friend Steve. It rang twice before a groggy, concerned voice answered. Dan, everything okay? Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. It's done, he managed to say, voice hoarse. I confronted her. It's over. There was a rustling on the other end, as if Steve had sat upright in bed. Jesus, hon, are you all right? Where are you? Downtown, near Adam's place. It got heated, but I'm fine. She's with him. The words nearly caught in his throat, a final sting. Steve cursed under his breath. Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you. Daniel started to protest. He didn't want to drag Steve out in the storm, but Steve was already insisting. I'm not letting you wander around alone right now. 15 minutes, tops. True to his word, Steve's car pulled up to the curb a short while later, wipers flailing against the downpour. Daniel slid into the passenger seat, soaked to the bone. Steve took one look at him and reached into the back seat, grabbing a dry hoodie to toss over. Here, man. As they drove, Steve didn't press for details. He just said, I'm sorry, Dan, and patted his shoulder. That simple gesture nearly undid Daniel. The whirlwind of the last few hours had kept him going, but now he felt the first heavy weight of heartbreak settle in. They arrived at Steve's apartment where his wife, Karen, had set out towels and a pot of hot tea, waiting anxiously. Karen gave Daniel a gentle hug and said, We're here for you. It was only then, in the warmth of their living room, that Daniel allowed himself to break down. He sank onto their couch and covered his face with his hands, silent tears mixing with the rainwater still on his skin. Steve sat beside him quietly, and Karen squeezed his shoulder, offering comfort without words. Eventually, when he'd composed himself, Daniel recounted the essentials of what happened. How he confronted Jessica and Adam, the things he said, the divorce papers, how she had collapsed in tears. Steve shook his head in disbelief, while Karen's eyes flashed with anger on Daniel's behalf. Good for you, she said quietly. She needed to face the consequences. As midnight neared, Steve insisted Daniel stay in the guest room rather than go home to an empty house or risk running into Jessica. Daniel agreed. The thought of seeing her tonight, or worse, having her show up begging, was too much. He turned off his phone after seeing a flurry of messages from her. Multiple missed calls and a string of texts pleading to please talk. He had no appetite for her words now. With a kind of grim finality, he blocked her number, at least for the night. There was nothing to discuss. Lying in the dark guest room, exhaustion finally caught up to him. His mind replayed the confrontation in jagged snippets. Her sobbing, his own voice shouting, the look on her face when he told her about the prenup. He wondered fleetingly what she was doing at that moment. Was she still at Adam's, crying on his shoulder? Were they fighting now, or was Adam comforting her? The thought churned his stomach, and he forced it away. It didn't matter. She had made her choice. In the morning, Daniel awoke to a dull ache in his body and a heavier one in his chest. But he also felt a steely resolve. There was work to do. First, he called Marcia Klein's office and instructed them to officially file the divorce petition with the court. The papers would be served to Jessica within days, but he doubted that would surprise her after last night. Next, he composed a brief but direct email to Jessica's parents, who lived in Ohio. He had always gotten along well with his in-laws. In some ways, he felt worse for them having to learn what their daughter had done. In the message, he explained that he and Jessica would be divorcing due to her infidelity, and that he was deeply saddened by what had transpired. He kept the tone measured and factual, and he attached one of the photos of Jessica and Adam at the festival as proof, knowing that, as painful as it would prevent any denial or spin from Jessica. He told them he appreciated the kindness they had shown him over the years. With a heavy heart, he hit send. By midday, he received a response. Her father, shocked and apologetic, saying he was ashamed of Jessica's behavior and that both he and her mother were going to call her that day. "You will always have our support, Daniel," the email read. "We are so sorry." Reading that, Daniel felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. He hadn't just lost a wife. He was losing the family that had become his own. But at least they understood the truth. Over the next 2 days, the fallout spread. Mutual friends learned of the split, some directly from Daniel, others through quiet word of mouth. Jessica's closest friend, a woman named Priya, called Daniel to express her disbelief and sympathy. Apparently, Jessica hadn't confided in even her, which didn't surprise Daniel given the secrecy. There was an undercurrent of gossip, too. By the end of the week, everyone in their small social circle and extended families knew that Jessica had cheated and that Daniel was divorcing her. The court of public opinion, at least in their world, was firmly on Daniel's side. Jessica largely went silent. She was no longer messaging him, perhaps realizing he'd blocked her. Instead, she seemed to retreat into the shadows. On Friday afternoon, 4 days after the confrontation, Daniel went back to the house in Oak Park to pack more of his own things and check on the state of affairs. He had stayed with Steve and Karen most of the week, not ready to face the emptiness of home. He wasn't sure if Jessica would have dared come by, but as he stepped inside the quiet house, he could tell she hadn't been there. A thin layer of dust on the entryway table and the undisturbed mail piled by the door indicated no one had entered since the weekend. He walked room to room, a strange melancholic calm washing over him. In the living room, their wedding photo still hung above the fireplace. He took it down and studied it. There they were, younger and radiant, completely oblivious to what life had in store. With a sigh, he set the photo face down on the mantel. It was time to remove these relics, but he didn't have the heart to smash it or throw it out just yet. Upstairs in the bedroom, he found things much as he left them. The bed was made, sheets clean. She hadn't returned here to sleep. The closet still held most of her clothes, although a few hangers were empty. Perhaps, he realized, she had Adam's place to retreat to, or a friend's couch. It hit him that aside from Adam, Jessica might not have many places to go. Her relationship with her parents would be strained now at best, and many of their mutual friends were avoiding her out of loyalty to him or disdain for what she'd done. Daniel noticed a cardboard box on the floor near her side of the bed. It contained some of her essentials hastily thrown in. Clothes, toiletries, a photo album. She must have come by early in the week while he was gone to grab a few necessities. The fact that she took so little told him she either didn't want to face the house, or she expected to come back eventually for the rest, perhaps when he wasn't around. He was glad he'd missed her. He wasn't ready to see her face to face again, not yet. Nonetheless, he had no intention of letting her settle back in. With determined efficiency, Daniel went to the garage and began gathering moving boxes. He started to systematically pack up Jessica's belongings, her drawers of clothes, her shoes, the framed pictures of her and her friends, the knickknacks on her nightstand. It was painful, but also cathartic in a way. Each filled box a step toward closing this chapter. Halfway through packing, he heard the front door open downstairs. He froze, heart pounding. Footsteps echoed and then a hesitant voice called, "Daniel, are you here?" It was Jessica. He steeled himself and stepped out to the top of the stairs. She stood in the entryway, looking small and uncertain. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. As her eyes met his, she wiped at them, as if she'd been crying on the way over. I came to get some things," she said softly, noticing the half-packed box in his hands. Her gaze traveled over the boxes and suitcases lining the hallway, and she paled. "You're packing up my stuff." Daniel descended the stairs slowly. Seeing her in their home, his home now, made his chest tighten with a mix of anger and residual sorrow. "I am," he replied evenly. "You'll need it, wherever you're staying." She flinched as if struck. I... I'm at a hotel, she said, voice trembling. Adam, I'm not with him. He let me stay a night, but... She trailed off. It's over with him. That confession hung in the air. Daniel felt a flicker of surprise. Only days after their big romantic plan was forced into the open, they'd fallen apart. Perhaps it shouldn't shock him. Relationships built on betrayal rarely thrive under pressure. Still, he made sure no pity showed on his face. That's not my concern, he said quietly. Wherever you end up, you can send someone to get the rest of your things, or I'll have them delivered. Jessica stepped closer, wringing her hands. Dan, please, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. Her voice cracked. I am so sorry for everything. You didn't deserve any of it. I was selfish and stupid, and I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she rushed on. I don't expect you to forgive me. I want you to know I take all the blame. If I could go back and undo it, I would. I'm sorry I hurt you, and I'm sorry I hurt so many people who cared about us. Daniel listened, arms crossed. Her apology, while certainly the one he deserved long ago, felt hollow now, too late and prompted only by dire consequences. He believed she was remorseful now, but it was a remorse born from loss, not true empathy. I appreciate you saying that, he said after a moment, voice calm. But it changes nothing. We're done, Jess. He used the nickname softly, almost out of habit, and saw her crumple further. I loved you with everything I had, and you destroyed that. There's no coming back? She nodded through her tears. I know, she whispered. I wish I could explain, not to excuse it, but there's no explanation that matters, he interrupted gently but firmly. You were unhappy or bored or whatever it was, and instead of talking to me, you betrayed me. You made choice after choice knowing it would devastate me if I found out, and you kept doing it. His voice hardened. That's all I need to know. That's who you chose to be. Jessica covered her face, sobbing. I hate myself for it, she choked out. I lost sight of everything, and by the time I realized it was too late and I was in it and... Daniel raised a hand. Enough, it is too late. He took a step forward, holding her gaze. You're going to have a lot of time to think about this, to regret it. That's your burden now, not mine. She lowered her hands, eyes red and desperate. I know, Is there anything I can do? At all? Even if it's small, to help you, to make amends? He almost let out a bitter laugh at that. Amends? There was nothing she could do to restore what was lost. But one thing did cross his mind, a final act of acceptance on her part. Don't contest the divorce, he said. Sign the settlement and go. That's the only help you can give me now. His tone was icy. Her shoulders sagged. I won't fight it, she whispered. I'll sign whatever you want. They stood there in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the hallway clock. Jessica looked around the home that had been theirs, eyes lingering on the familiar furniture, the photos, including the one he'd faced down. It was as if she were memorizing it, saying goodbye. My parents won't even speak to me, she said quietly. They're so angry. I don't blame them. And most of our friends, she sighed. I ruined all of it. Daniel didn't respond. It was true. Her actions had isolated her. He almost felt a twinge of, not empathy, but a recognition of the profound loneliness that lay ahead for her. Almost. Finally, Jessica wiped her face and straightened. I'll go now, she said softly. I won't bother you again after this. She looked at the boxes with her name scrawled in marker. Maybe you can just text me when I should come get the rest. I'll have them sent to your parents' address, Daniel replied, not wanting her to have excuses to reappear. It's best that way. She nodded, fresh pain crossing her face as she realized what that meant. She was exiled from the home they'd shared. Without another word, she turned and opened the front door. Before stepping out, she paused and glanced back at him. For what it's worth, I really did love you, she whispered. I never stopped. I was just lost. Daniel felt a surge of anger at those words. How dare she talk of love now? But instead of lashing out, he simply met her gaze with cool, tired eyes. If you truly loved me, he said, you wouldn't have done any of this. She took that like a blow. closing her eyes for a moment. Then, with a final defeated nod, Jessica slipped out into the afternoon light and shut the door quietly behind her. Daniel stood in the silence of the foyer, watching the dust motes dance in a beam of sun that had broken through the clouds. He felt hollow. The triumph of revenge had ebbed, leaving a cavernous emptiness and relief at once. It struck him that the woman who just left was both familiar and a stranger, the woman he loved and the one he now despised, wrapped in one broken person. But she was out of his life now, on her way to facing the consequences she had wrought. And he was free, albeit standing amidst the ghost of a life he had to rebuild from scratch. He inhaled deeply and climbed the stairs to finish packing up the remnants of Jessica's presence. Every box sealed was like closing a door on a chapter of his life, and as painful as that was, he knew it was also necessary. Chapter 9. The Price Paid. 6 months later, the crisp winter air had given way to the gentle warmth of early spring. Life in Chicago carried on, seasons changing as they always did. For Daniel, those months were a period of recovery and transformation. The divorce had been finalized swiftly. By January, the paperwork was signed, the settlement done. True to her word, Jessica hadn't contested a thing. She signed everything with barely a peep, as if eager to accept her punishment. In the end, the terms were stark. The prenup and negotiations left her with only a modest fraction of their savings and whatever personal belongings she had. Daniel kept the house, which he promptly sold. It was too large and haunted by memories he didn't care to keep. He moved to a modern apartment in the city, trading suburban quiet for a fresh start amid urban energy. There, he gradually found peace. He threw himself into work, earning a promotion by spring, perhaps an unexpected silver lining of having fewer distractions. He also took up running again, pounding away stress on lakeside trails, letting the wind and waves off Lake Michigan clear his mind. With therapy and the unwavering support of friends and family, his heart slowly began to heal. He still felt the sting of betrayal, but it was no longer an open wound, more a scar that reminded him to be wiser, but not to close himself off from the world. As for Jessica, word filtered back to him in bits and pieces, though he never sought it out. True to his decree, he hadn't spoken to her since that day at the house, but mutual acquaintances occasionally provided updates. He learned that she had indeed lost her job a couple of months after the divorce. Her performance had plummeted, and she'd used all her sick days dealing with the emotional fallout. When a round of layoffs came, her boss let her go. Perhaps not purely as punishment for her personal life, but it certainly didn't help that she was distracted and infamous in their small industry circle for the scandal. Chicago's marketing community could be surprisingly gossip-prone, and the news of why she suddenly took time off had made the rounds. Professional contacts who once respected her grew distant. Without a job and with her funds dwindling, Jessica had to give up the upscale lifestyle she once enjoyed. She sold her car. Without a steady income, she couldn't afford the payments or insurance. Rumor had it she moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a far-flung suburb where rent was cheap, the kind of place well below the standard she was used to. Her relationship with Adam had evaporated almost immediately. In the immediate aftermath of the confrontation, they tried to stick together, trauma bonding out of necessity, but it didn't last. The fantasy they'd built crumbled under real-world pressures. They argued about money, about blame. Apparently, Adam hadn't known the extent of her deceit like the stolen money or the prenup, and when it all came out, he grew resentful. Within weeks, they parted ways. Adam quit his job in Chicago and moved to the West Coast to restart, leaving Jessica entirely alone to pick up the pieces of her life. The poetic justice wasn't lost on Daniel. She had sacrificed her marriage for that man, and he in turn abandoned her when things got tough. Her parents, while eventually speaking to her again, did not offer the financial rescue she might have hoped for. They were deeply disappointed, and though they didn't disown her, they believed she needed to face the consequences of her actions. A friend told Daniel that Jessica's mom had visited her once and was heartbroken to see how far her daughter had fallen. But she stood firm that Jessica must learn from this and rebuild on her own. Early one Friday evening, Daniel left his office downtown and walked to a nearby cafe, where he was meeting Steve for a bite. The city was alive with spring, tulips blooming in planters, people shedding their coats to feel the sun. As he neared the cafe, he passed a bus stop and paused to wait for the crossing light. That's when he saw her. Jessica was sitting on the bench at the bus stop, a worn beige coat wrapped around her despite the mild air. She looked thinner and tired. In her lap was a grocery bag filled with what looked like canned goods and basic staples. Perhaps she had been shopping at the discount market across town, one of the few places where money stretched for those on a tight budget. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her hair was gathered in a simple braid. To Daniel, she was almost unrecognizable from the vibrant, well-put-together woman he once knew. This was a humbled figure, weighed down by life. He hadn't seen her since that brief encounter at the house. A swirl of feelings rose in him now. Pity, anger, closure, an odd mix. He could have turned and crossed the street without her noticing, but something made him linger a moment. As if sensing his gaze, Jessica looked up. Her eyes widened in a flash of surprise and shame as she recognized him. For a moment, neither of them moved or spoke. They were two people with a world of history between them, now separated by a few feet and an ocean of consequences. Jessica managed a feeble half-smile of acknowledgement, a reflex of politeness and lingering affection, perhaps. Daniel gave a small nod in return. His face remained impassive, but inwardly, he was struck by how truly defeated she appeared. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. Jessica broke the gaze first, standing up with her groceries. She cast her eyes down. Whether in regret or simply to avoid further humiliation, Daniel couldn't be sure. In another life, he might have approached, might have offered a hand or a kind word. But that Daniel was gone, and any obligation he had to her was severed. As she stepped onto the bus, she glanced back one last time. In her eyes, he saw tears forming. Then she disappeared inside. The bus pulled away, leaving a faint trail of exhaust. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He watched the bus until it merged into traffic and was lost among the sea of vehicles. Finally, he turned and continued on to the caf. Steve was already at a sidewalk table, 2 beers in front of him. He greeted Daniel with a smile. "You okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Daniel managed a small smile as he sat down and took a sip of the beer. "In a way, I did," he said quietly. He didn't elaborate, and Steve didn't press. They began chatting about work, about an upcoming Cubs game they planned to attend, about anything other than the past. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Daniel felt a sense of calm. The worst was behind him. Justice, cold and complete, had been served. Jessica was facing the life she'd earned with her choices. A far lonelier, harder life than she likely ever imagined for herself. And Daniel had escaped the nightmare and found solid ground again. Before they parted that evening, Steve clapped Daniel on the back. "Proud of you, man. You've come a long way." Daniel nodded. He knew he had. The man he was 6 months ago, shattered and enraged, had forged himself anew. He had faced betrayal, meted out retribution, and emerged intact. Perhaps a bit scarred, a bit more guarded, but intact, and hopeful that better days were ahead. As he walked home through the gentle spring night, Daniel reflected on the truth of the old adage. Betrayal is a wound that eventually heals, but it leaves a scar. Jessica would carry her scars as well. Only hers were the kind one earns from self-inflicted wounds and the collapse of a life built on deceit. He found that he could live with his own scars. In fact, each day going forward was a little easier, a little brighter. In the end, he had found the revenge he sought, methodical, complete, and just. Jessica had lost everything as he vowed she would. Her marriage, her reputation, her security, even the man for whom she'd risked it all. And Daniel had gained something invaluable in return. The freedom to start over, knowing he had stood up for himself and emerged stronger. It was a high price that had been paid by everyone. But it was, in Daniel's eyes, the price of betrayal. And it had been paid in full.